Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here. So today I finally have the Shenhe video ready. This is just the first math guide. Obviously I can't go into all the details because there's a lot to go into, especially given that she's a character that can buff other characters. So then we will need to talk about how the rotation will be like for the other characters, etc. And those will come in future videos because I really need to go into detail for those. But for this video itself, we'll talk about Shenhe. We'll talk about how people are misunderstanding how she works, the corrections to her to the misunderstandings. I'll talk about her artifact options. I'll talk about her kit, her talents, her passives, her constellations, etc. So think of this as like the introduction to Shenhe as well. But this is Math Guide 1, so obviously there will be some math involved, and I'll run you guys through it. So this is Shenhe. I gotta say I really like her character design. She kinda reminds me of Ganyu actually, with a bit of a more icy demeanor. Okay, but that being said, these are her stats. Her Ascension substat is at 10%. Her signature weapon has a very high base attack. It's one of the highest base attack. Same as the Song of Broken Pines, where it's 741. Base attack at level 1 is 49. And her weapon gives attack percent substat as well, although it's a low value because the base attack is high. But that's fine because the base attack being high is actually very important for her. Let's talk about her weapons refinement effect, or the weapon effect itself. So I forgot to mention that her signature weapon is called Calamity Queller. It looks really good. It's very fitting for her. Now the weapon itself at R1 it gives 12% all elemental damage bonus. You obtain something called Consummation for 20 seconds. Effectively it's a buff for 20 seconds after using an elemental skill. What it does is that it increases your attack by 3.2% every second. And this attack increase can stack up to 6 times. Okay, maybe let me just show it here. Yeah. So it can stack up to 6 times. And when the character equipped with this weapon is not on the field, the attack increase is doubled. So effectively, this is really designed for her where you use her elemental skill, you switch off field, and you will get a huge attack buff. By huge, I'm talking about at R1, you get 3.2% if we assume that you're not on the field. We double that, that's 6.4%. 6.4% times 6, you get very sizable 36 plus 38.4%. Okay, 38.4% on R1 together with this attack percent plus such a high base attack. Along with her attacks, her essential substat giving her attack. All of these factors are actually very important because of how her kit works. And R5 obviously doubles this, doubles the damage bonus, doubles the attack that you gain per second. So it's 77.8% if I didn't remember wrongly. Because I don't remember the actual attack percent because I already applied it correctly in the math. So it really gives a lot of attack percent, which is exactly what she needs. She doesn't really need crit rate or crit damage if you're using her as a buffer per se. But there are different builds to her, and I'll talk about that in the artifact options. Just bear in mind that with the Calamity Queller, you will get 1045 base attack, which is really high. At character level 90 together with weapon level 90. That's really high. Now, I have here quite a number of permutation, but effectively, you'll notice that all of them are the same other than the first two, where we go full attack percent. By full attack percent, we mean attack sense, attack goblet, attack hit piece. And the rest is the standard cookie cutter, attack percent, elemental goblet, and CR or CD helmet. But I don't want to go into too much detail on that because when I talk about the artifact options, we will cover those. Okay. These are the damage figures. Again, like I said, when I cover the artifact options, I'll cover the damage figures. Her damage figures don't look high right now because I have not done the rotation. You can notice the structural rotations because I have not done them yet. It's also to remind myself to do it. At least we have the specific damage as well as the damage buff. It's actually very, very noticeable. 4k is a lot. This is not the actual damage figure, by the way. This is a buff that's applied to the character before their crit or damage bonuses. So, let's talk about her passives. Precise comings and goings give for 25% more rewards when dispatched on a Liyue expedition that takes longer than 20 hours. So pretty straightforward. Basically, it's good for busy people who can't fully utilize the current 15 hours characters. Because if you set your timing correctly, right, you basically can do 3 expeditions in 2 days instead of 2 expeditions. Basically, the easiest way for me to say this is do one at 9 AM, complete your expedition at 9 AM, complete and start your expeditions at 9 AM and 12 midnight every day. It will cycle through on the first day, sorry, and the next day it will be 3 PM. Then you will cycle through every day. Okay. But even I myself have not been doing 3 expeditions every 2 days for longest time. Ever since I came back after the 3 weeks break, I have only been doing 1 expedition per day really. So this is good for me. Deific Embrace. This passive is her A1. An active character within the field created by her burst gains 10% cryo damage bonus. So it's kind of like Ganyu's, one of Ganyu's, I can't remember whether it's a Constellation or her passive, where you gain 20% cryo damage bonus while standing in there. So this is a nice and simple buff regardless of whether you have the Icy Quill Stacks or not. You'll notice that a lot of her kit and passives are going to revolve around buffing. Okay, so the third passive, or the A4 passive, which is in my opinion one of the most important passive. After Shenhe uses Spring Spirit Summoning, she will grant all nearby party members the following effects. Press Elemental Skill. When you do a press on the Elemental Skill, you will increase the Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst damage by 15% for 10 seconds for the entire team, for the entire party. This is very nice. When you do a hold, normal, charge, and plunging attack damage is increased by 15% for 15 seconds. Because your hold duration, the cooldown duration is 15 seconds, the press is 10 seconds. So effectively, with C1, if you do both, right, you will always get these buffs. It's really, really nice. And when either effect is active, activating either effect again will refresh the duration. So you can use a hold, and then if you have C1, you can hold again somewhere in between. Okay? This is important because this ties into how she buffs the team without any stats when your stats are consumed. But just bear in mind, putting aside the limit of her stats, if you use her signature weapon and build R1, the stack will provide better buff than the press for her burst. Meaning, if let's say if you want to do more stats, right? The more stats that you have, each of the stat buff does a lot more than this burst damage increase by 15%. Although the burst damage increase by 15% does last for a much longer time. So without having done the rotation for the math, I can't say whether or not it's better in the long run in terms of the full duration for this, or whether it's better to go for hold. And you also may differ on character, which character that you're buffing. So this is the reason why I say Shenhe, sorry, I keep pronouncing her wrongly. Shenhe is not going. The math for Shenhe is going to be quite tedious. Yeah, it will take me more time. Okay, so these are her passives. Now I want to talk about her constellations. Because her constellations, unlike most characters, they are all pretty useful. Though there are some caveats to them, and I'll talk about them. So first off, C1. C1 is very, very, very good. Sprint Summoning can be used one more time. So this is, in my opinion, the most important and valuable constellation for her, regardless of which build that you're playing, whether it's a buffer, it's a sub DPS, or even a main DPS with Chongyun. In fact, if you want to use it as a buffer, this constellation might be a must. I'll have to do more detailed math to be sure in terms of like comparing the full rotation when you have C0 and C1. But just looking at this, right, you know this is really, really good because it allows her to double the stats that she can provide. C2 Centered Spirit. The burst now lasts for 6 seconds longer. That's crazy. That's a 50% increase in her burst duration from 12 to 18 seconds. Active characters within the skills field deals 15% increased cryo crit damage. So with this increase from 12 to 18 seconds, it means only 2 seconds downtime for her burst, which implies almost 100% uptime for the 10% cryo damage bonus for A1 passive, as well as this 15% increased cryo crit damage. However, her burst will consume her Icy Quill Stacks fairly quickly. So I'll do a math on the optimal rotations on this. C2 will also help to buff the gap when your Ayaka's burst is in its downtime or your Ganyu C6 combo is in its downtime. You kind of get what I'm trying to say here, right? You use her stats, you use Ayaka's burst, and when Ayaka's burst is on cooldown, you can switch back to Shenhe to use her burst to provide again buffs, although not as much as the stacks, but it's still pretty nice buffs to your Ayaka or even your Ganyu. As for Ganyu, you should not use her burst. I'll talk about that separately when we go in detail on Ganyu. Depending on the comp. I mean, if it's a freeze comp, you still want to use Ganyu's freeze. Ganyu's burst, that's for sure. If it's a melt comp, you might want to consider not using her burst at all. And that also opens you up to the option of using 4-piece Shiminawa without any negative impact. Because 4-piece Shiminawa is definitely the best set for melt DPS Ganyu. And if you have C6 Ganyu, if you know how C6 Ganyu works, basically after you cast your elemental skill, your next charge attack doesn't require any charging. Which means that effectively you can use your stats, especially against a single target, you can use a hole. Once a hole on her elemental skill will give you 6 stats. Those 6 stats, what they will do is, they are perfect for using her elemental skill, plus the immediate charge attack. And since you have C6, you have 2 charges, right? And you use your elemental skill again, you use the charge attack again, and that's 6 stats. Just nice against 1 target. I didn't manage to talk about this earlier, but basically her stats, right, gets consumed every target. It's not every hit, it's every target. Or rather every target that was dealt cryo damage. Okay? Because I didn't want to go too much into it. But I will talk a bit about the stats later. Okay, so bear with me first. So effectively, right, there are different types of playstyles here. You can go for a more burst mode where you use her buffs, her stats to buff your other cryo main DPS and use their burst. Then you switch back to Shenhe, cast her burst, and provide other types of damage buff to your main DPS while their main source or highest source of damage is in downtime. So there is some way to, how should I put it? There is definitely a way to optimize her buffs and the rotation. I have given some thought to this, but I haven't had a chance to really do out the whole math for Ganyu and Ayaka as well, because I hope you guys have know by now when you have been if you have been following my math videos, you know that the hardest part is always starting a new character. So I have not done math for Ganyu or Ayaka prior to this, so I have to do it from scratch as well. So that's why it will take me a bit more time. So I sincerely apologize for that. Or rather, I seek your understanding for that. Because I do know, I feel very bad that I wasn't able to churn out as much videos as I can this week. Like, I think this is only my second video of this week, which is kind of bad because today is already Thursday, right? at the point of me recording this video. Okay, so I hope C2 is explain. I hope C2 helps to explain to you guys how it works. And before you think her burst is bad, watch till the end of the video and I'll tell you why I think her burst is actually pretty good if it's buffed with her stats. C3 very straightforward, increases her buffs and it's actually very substantial. It's approximately 600 increase for a pure attack build. For a pure attack buffer build. C4 Insight. When characters under the effects of Icy Quill applied by Shenhe trigger its damage bonus effects, Shenhe will gain a Skyfrost Mantra stack. It's freaking stacks again, man. miHoYo seems to love stacks recently. So when Shenhe uses Spring Spirit Summoning... Oh wait, Spring Spirit. No wonder I felt very weird when I said Spring... Sprint. Sorry, a typo here. Okay. So when Shenhe uses Spring Spirit Summoning, she will consume all stats of this Skyfrost Mantra, which means that if you are using Hold, you only have 15 seconds to get 50 stats. Right? Because what it does is that each stack increases the damage of this specific Spring Spirit Summoning by 5% the damage. So you can accumulate up to 50 stats at the maximum. Each of the stats lasts for 60 seconds. But this 60 seconds, it doesn't really help, right? Or rather, it doesn't really help if you don't have C6. Both the 50 stats and the stats lasting for 60 seconds doesn't help unless you have C6. And I'll talk more about that when we talk about C6. But this does increase her damage quite significantly, it's 250%. Now it depends on whether this 250% is a separate damage multiplier like Yoimiya's elemental skill, or is it sharing the same pool as the damage bonuses? Even if it shares the same pool as the damage bonuses like your elemental damage, your charge attack damage, etc., or your elemental skill damage, all of those, 250%, even if it has diminishing returns, is still a very significant boost. And honestly, I think it's not even definitely doable if you have C6, it's just maybe doable. I have to give this a lot more thought. Because you gotta remember, although the stats last for 60 seconds, the Icy Quill duration only lasts for 15 seconds if you're using Hope. So you still need to get 50 stats in 15 seconds. I don't know of any characters that attack that fast in this game, even if you have C6. So yeah. I'll do detailed math for it once we are looking into the optimal rotations in future videos. Now C5, like I said, it's kind of hard to comment on the value of this until we have the optimal rotations. But remember, the low DOT on this means Shenhe's damage buffs gives about plus 126% boost. It's a huge boost actually. Okay, I apologize for this. This Constellation portion was actually meant to be after something else, but I changed the session order. So yeah, the way I phrase it here is not very correct. Let me just remove this part here. Okay. I'll show you guys the actual comparison on the figures, etc. for that. Let's talk about C6, Mystical Abandon. When characters trigger Icy Quill's effect using normal and charge attack damage, no Icy Quill stats will be used. This sounds incredible, right? It sounds OP. But it's only on normal and charge attack damage, which means that you need to be careful in managing the stats. Why? If you are using your Ganyu, for example, if you use your elemental skill, then you use your charge attack. If your elemental skill happens to hit 3 enemies, you'll be left with 1 stat if you use press, and you'll be left with 3 stats if you use hold. So what I'm trying to say here is that you have to be very careful. While you are doing your charge attacks, make sure that you don't use other stuff that will eventually use up all your stats. Because if you use up all your stats on other skills like your burst, be it Shenhe's burst or Ganyu's burst, you will not have your stats anymore, which means you will also not be able to trigger your normal and charge attack damage. Because what this description says is that it doesn't use the stack. It's not that it does not require the stack. There's a big difference. Which means that for this to be effective, you need to have at least one stack active, one stack present. So when you are at C0 and you use your hold, you should use a hold by the way, because C0's hold buffs your normal charge attack. So if you use your hold, you will have 6 stats. And I'll explain more about why it's 6 stats and not 7 stats. I know the description says 7 and 5, but I'll explain to you guys, no worries. So 6 stats means that you can only afford to use 5 stats. Okay, 5 stats. So you can't even really use your C6 combo, Ganyu C6 combo. Unless there's only less than 3 targets. And if you use her elemental burst, for sure you'll run out of the stats before the Icy Quill duration expires, and this effect will be wasted. So that's why I say that this looks OP, yes, but you need to be careful in managing the stats. It doesn't immediately grant you a free pass in spamming. It doesn't. Because you have to make sure that you don't use other stuff that will use out your stats. Okay? Now let's talk about Icy Quill Stacks. This is the one where I'll talk about why it's 4 and 6 and not 5 and 7. It's very simple, because her elemental skill does cryo damage, so it actually takes up 1 stack. So her press will effectively give you 4 stats, her hold gives you 6 stats. This point actually makes the duration and cooldown of the buffs making a lot more sense, helping it make a lot more sense. Because at 10 seconds for press and 15 seconds for hold, if it were 5 and 7 it feels a bit weird, but at 4 and 6 it's very straightforward because it's effectively 2.5 seconds per stack. You get 10 seconds more on your hold in terms of the duration and cooldown, and you also get 2 more stats. It's really straightforward this way. And if you have any doubts regarding this, just go ahead and check out one of the animation where there was actual combat. You will see how her damage works. You will see that there's no odd number of stats. Her elemental skill really uses up 1 stack, so you will get 4 stats and 6 stats after. Okay. Next I want to talk about her elemental burst. Likewise, from the same video where I did a frame by frame analysis, her burst does 5 adds 2 ticks before C2 and 8 adds 2 at C2+. It's approximately about 2.5 seconds per pair of ticks. Why do I say per pair of ticks? Because what happens is that at each interval, where it's time for her to deal damage, she actually does 2 ticks. So that low DOT that you see on her burst, which is like 50+% and 60+% at level 12, I think, if I don't remember wrongly, those actually procs twice every 2.5 seconds. So 8x2 is available in the video, it can be seen clearly. 5x2 is me extrapolating based on the time required between each pair of ticks. So if you are looking to use her as a pure buffer, I would not recommend using her burst. Unless you are just using her burst to buff, for the burst buff, rather than the stacks buff. I.e. don't use them together, alternate them to buff. Because they are going to use up your stats real fast. Just think about it, right? In 2.5 seconds, they will use up 4 stats. In 2.5 seconds, your Ganyu will have only used 2 stats or 3 stats, depending on whether you use the elemental skill. So I hope you see where I'm coming from here, where I don't recommend using her bursts unless you're alternating them. You can alternate them. All I'm trying to say here is don't use them together if you're intending to use her as a buffer. But you can go for a burst style on your other DPS, you finish her stats quickly and then you cast a burst for the bonuses. 10% cryo damage bonus, this is from her A1 passive. 15% cryo and physical resistance shred from her burst itself. You have 15% crit damage at C2 too. So all of these are really good. These are pretty good, especially the cryo resistance shred. the 15% cryo resistance share will make quite a bit of difference. So just bear this in mind. And this is very similar to what I just talked about earlier when I was talking about Ayaka's, using Ayaka's burst or using Ganyu C6 combo, right? And no worries, I'll talk about all this in more detail when we talk about the rotations. Now let me go on to artifact options. So artifact builds wise, right, I see a few options here. So first off is pure attack buffer. You're going to use 2 Gladiators and 2 Shiminawa so that you get 18% attack, 80% attack, total 36% attack just from the artifact set effect. And you're going to go full attack. Attack percent Sense, attack percent Goblet, attack percent Circlet. This is the pure attack buffer I'm talking about. Now you can also go main or sub DPS build in a freeze comp. I recommend using 4 Blizzard so that it's easy to stack your CR and CD. It's actually achievable to hit a 400 CR and 200 CD target. Although it's tough, but it's achievable. And obviously we go attack cryo, 3 damage, since we are talking about using her as a sub DPS and even a main DPS with Chongyun. I have yet to work out the figures for main DPS with Chongyun, so that remains to be seen how effective it is, whether it's worthwhile. But for sure, in order to use her as a main DPS, you will need C6. Without C6, you don't even need to talk about her as a main DPS build. You just run out of stats way too soon. Although, technically speaking, her burst does offer other types of cryo buffs, like we have seen here. But still, C6 main, if you want to use as a main DPS, C6 will be much better. But that's total wheel territory, so. Now, I have another kind of concept where I call it a hybrid build in freeze comp. By the way, when I say freeze comp here, how should I put it? The Shenhe is the main DPS, Chongyun is just a supporting DPS, Kokomi is your healer / Hydro enabler, and then you have someone like Kazuha to help provide buffs as well as grouping enemies together. Okay, but it's not a cheap build. I just mentioned 3 5 stars and 1 4 star. So yeah, it's not a cheap build. But it can be effective. I'm kind of interested in trying that. But it really depends on whether I can salvage enough pieces of 4-piece Blizzard, because I don't really want to go farm that domain just for Shenhe. And sorry, I was talking about hybrid breed, right? So why I call it a hybrid build, is because you are using attack, cryo, and crit damage for your Sense Goblet Circlet. You are using 4-piece Blizzard, but you don't target 100 CR / 200 CD target. You go for 75 CR and 140 CD target. Why 75 instead of 70? Because with the Blizzard 4-piece set plus Cryo Resonance, you already get 55 CR. If I assume a base roll of CR on every artifact but no upgrades, you would already get 75 CR. You can go for 70 CR too, by the way. Let's say if you're not lucky with the base rolls, it's fine. But the reason why we drop our CR/CD is because we want to focus on attack percent substats. We do deal lesser damage than, say, a full-on sub-DPS build, but we also buff more. But whether there's any merit and what's the recommendation I'll do between these builds, like I said, I need the full rotation math for that. Sub-DPS build in Ganyu Milkong, because you are not always being you're not always going to be playing a sub DPS build in freeze comp, right? There's also Ganyu Milkong. So in Ganyu Milkong, you will not have 4 Blizzard. Or technically speaking, you can use 4 Blizzard because there is still 2 characters, right? But you're using Melt. 2 cryo characters, you have cryo resonance, but you don't have 4-piece Blizzard effect because you shouldn't be using freeze. You should be doing melt. Okay, So if that's the case, I'll recommend going 2 Blizzard, 2 Shimmy, or 2 Glads, so that this is a sub DPS build. Remember, this is a sub DPS build. Okay. Naturally, you can use pure attack buffer in any build. You don't really have any restrictions. This works for any build. It can be freeze con, can be melt com. That's fine. So freeze com here, sub DPS build for freeze com. It can be also for Ayaka freeze com. Ayaka doesn't really work well for reverse melt or melt com, so that's why I only mentioned Ganyu melt com here. And since it's sub DPS build, obviously we go attack cryo and CD or CR. So we will have a 60 CR target along with sorry, you should use CD. I'm saying wrongly. You should use CD because you still get 15% CR from cryo resonance. Not to mention Ganyu. Oh, sorry. Ganyu's crit rate is only for herself, not for Shenhe. So you can target a 60 CR / 160 CT target here. So effectively, with 4-piece Blizzard, you can go for higher CR. Without 4-piece Blizzard, you're gonna have to lower your CR. But it's still doable. Okay, all of this is still manageable. I'll cover the rotations and recommendations in future videos once I take the time to build out all the necessary math. Okay. So let us go to the damage figures, right? I wanted to talk quickly. So the first 2 rows is going to be 2-piece Gladiator, 2-piece Shiminawa. Sorry, first 2 columns. It's going to be 2-piece Shiminawa and 2-piece Gladiators, pure attack buff build. The next 2 is the 4-piece Blizzard main / sub DPS, obviously in the freeze comp. 4 Blizzard hybrid. And 2-piece Shiminawa, 2-piece Blizzard, sub DPS in a Ganyu melt comp. So make things easier, let me just freeze the view here. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly look at the figures. So level 9 elemental skill in a level 9 burst, you'll see here that there's still some additional figures that have not worked out. Because while I was doing them halfway, I decided to stop and focus on the buffing portion. Okay. Because technically speaking, C4 affects your more of the sub DPS build, and C6 is also it affects buff as well, but more in terms of duration rather than the buffed figures. So you see here that pure attack buffer build, in terms of your Shenhe's damage, you do lose out quite a bit. Compare that to say a sub DPS build with freeze comp, you lose out quite a bit. Right, it's almost double. Effectively, it's almost double the amount of damage. When you go hybrid, you also lose out damage as opposed to the the main focus, the focus on the main and sub DPS, but you do buff more. We're talking about 2.1k versus 2.7k. Now, if you don't already know how my math videos usually work, the first column of each artifact is R1, second column is R5. Okay, so these are R1 figures, this is R5 figure. So you see here for pure attack buffer at level 9 elemental skill, you are able to buff 3.4k. If you use a sub DPS focus build, it's 2.1k. I'll just talk about the R1 figures for now. If you use the hybrid, you do get a very nice attack where it's 2.7k. So it's 600 more than the build that's focused on Shenhe's damage. And you don't lose out that much damage if you think about it. But before I do the full rotation math, I don't want to hold. I'm going to hold on my recommendation. I don't talk about my recommendation until I do the full rotation math, because we also need to compare, right? What's the buff effect? Whether or not this additional 600 attack is worth it for the team DPS per se. If you go for a 2-piece Shiminawa, 2-piece Blizzard in a Ganyu melt comp, which is kind of your only choice because you can't use 4-piece Blizzard in a Ganyu melt comp for at least for Shenhe, then your damage will have to be sacrificed. Why? Because you don't get as much CR and CD stats. So naturally the damage is sacrificed. Attack buff wise, we still are able to get about 2.4k. So it's lower than the 4-piece hybrid, but at least it's still higher than the 4-piece Blizzard sub DPS focus or Shenhe DPS focus build. The pure attack buffer obviously gives the most. Okay, so this was what I wanted to talk about, and I don't want to talk about the burst figures yet because I think it will kind of give away what I want to talk about next. Okay, so let me just unfreeze so that we get more in the view. Alright, now we are nearing the end of this video. I just want to talk about the misunderstandings of Shenhe. I realize that a lot of people think that Shenhe's buff is the same as Bennett or Sarah. It is not the same. Okay, it's not the same. It is similar to how Itto's Keisagiri is increased by 35% of his defense, or how Zhongli's attacks are increased by X percentage of his HP. What this really means is that Shenhe's buff is not affected by the buffed characters' talent multipliers. Unlike Bennett or Sarah's, their buffs will be multiplied by the talent multipliers, but Shenhe's buff is not. But Shenhe's buff will still be affected by the buffed characters, CRCD, and damage bonuses. By damage bonus, I'm talking about elemental damage bonuses, charge attack bonuses, normal attack bonuses, whatever the case is. Those are all lumped together in one pool. Now, you may think that this makes her buff bad, but remember, Shenhe's buff is based on her current attack, not base attack. Do you now see why we are going full attack on her? Do you now see why her signature weapon is good for her? High base attack, tons of attack percentage just from her weapon. Her ascension subset is also attack percent. Yeah, you gotta start to see how everything comes together, right? For those people who always complain about the character being bad when MiHoYo just releases it, or when information of it is just out before the character is even live, always remember this thing, okay? MiHoYo, this is a gacha game. MiHoYo knows how to design their characters to make you want them and pull them. Their kits can't be that bad. Unless they are doing a specific role like healer and you expect them to be a DPS. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about, yeah? But even for that character, when you see my math, I already say that she's not a good DPS character. Okay? But that's that character. Let's not talk about that character. So with this in mind, just remember that Shenhe, you can go full attack on her and she can be a very good buffer. Okay. The interesting thing is coming later. I don't want to show that yet. So the second point I want to talk about is that low talent multipliers are actually good for her buff. When you see low talent multipliers, it's not always bad, right? Because depending on how fast they tick, it can be a difference. I've already talked about her burst, Shenhe's burst, where it actually ticks twice every interval. So it's not so bad. Let's use her own burst multipliers as an example for me to show you guys, and I'll compare against Bennett. I'll do a comparison against Bennett for you guys to see. So this is Shenhe's level 9 elemental skill buffing her own burst using a full attack buff build. So initial cast damage is 171.36% multiplier. The DOT is 56.3% per tick. So without buff, it's really bad. The initial cast is 6.8k and the tick is 2.4k per tick, so it's about 4.8k per every 2.5 seconds. With buff, however, her initial cast damage actually gets a 42% increase to 9.6k or 9.7k if you want to round up. So it's about 42%. But the interesting thing is that her DOT, her damage tick in her buff, with the low multiplier, you will actually see her damage more than double, right? It more than doubles the damage buff because it provides a so-called flat buff. So the actual buff is plus 129%. Just look at this figure, man. it's so straightforward, it's so easy to tell that it more than doubles it. Because double of this is 4.8k and 4.8k is less than 5.5k. How about if we compare Bennett's level 13 buff? Level 13 meaning that he's C5. Level 90 Bennett, level 90 Aquila Fervonia, because that's the highest base attack weapon that we have on the sword. Same multipliers, without buff, same figure. With buff, what we have here is a 26% boost for her initial cast damage and a 26% boost for the DOT. Because remember, Bennett's buff is multiplied by the talent multiplier of the character receiving the buff. So in this case, because we are using Shenhe's burst as an example, she is the one receiving the buff. That's why Bennett only buffs her DOT by 26%, and it's really bad because we are talking about 11k versus 6k. With the Shenhe's buff to her own burst, she does almost double the damage as opposed to when we have a fully built, fully decked out Bennett's crown buff. It almost doubles. Okay? So I hope you guys can understand, right? Just because you see low talent multipliers doesn't always mean it's bad. At least for the case of Shenhe. You have to understand how a character works before complaining about the character. Now, Shenhe really buffs very well for low to medium talent multipliers. You can see from the percentage differences here. I mean, even with it being more than 100%, I am still able to buff more on Shenhe. Granted, this is still a full attack buff build. Oh, and but we have to remember that this Bennett is also fully built, right? It's C5 Bennett with a crown burst. FYI, all the current top tier cryo DPS characters right now do not have one hit high talent multipliers. They are all low medium with multiple hits. Like for Ayaka, you have I think about 200 to 300%, and for Ganyu, if you crown her attack, it's 230% on the first hit and 392 on the second hit. So 392% is, you can consider it high. And I have done the math for Bennett buffing her the second hit. There are scenarios where Bennett's buff on the higher multiplier, the 392% for Ganyu, right? It does buff more than Shenhe's. So which is why I say that the way Shenhe's buff works is it really buffs very well for low medium talent multipliers, but not for high talent multipliers. But at the same time, there's a catch here where because Shenhe has a stack consumption issue, this stack consumption really suffers when it's more than one target if you're going to be doing multiple hits with low medium talent multipliers. If it's a single target, Shenhe's buff is still very nice and very consistent. Now, although I keep saying that I have not done the rotations, I did do a bit of calculation for Bennett versus Shenhe for Ganyu. At least just the damage itself, not the entire rotation, but the damage itself on like one Frost Flake Bloom. Or rather, one Frost Flake Arrow plus Bloom. Okay, so I wanted to do a sneak peek on this before I release the next videos. So you see here, a fully built Bennett, which is the same Bennett that we use here. Our Frost Flake damage with the first two hits her charge attack, we get about 76k. If we use a full attack build Shenhe with level 90 R1 Calamity, level 90 Shenhe C0, level 6 elemental skill, we actually buff lesser. It's actually, compared to Bennett, a fully built Bennett, we buff 2% lesser. Why? Because her elemental skill is only level 6. Honestly speaking, this is not a fair comparison. You should at least get her buff to level 9 elemental skill to compare against a crowned burst. Okay, I understand it's a 5-star character. That's why I say level at 9 elemental skill is where the so-called fair comparison should be done, because this costs a lot more, right? And the reason why it's 2% lesser is because the second hit on Ganyu's charge attack has a high damage multiplier, at least if it's crowned. This is a crowned Ganyu's multiplier along with a R5 Amos. Actually, the stats is completely based on mine. So, yeah, my Ganyu. In fact, I can tell you guys that the first hit on this combo, this charge attack, the first hit actually with Shenhe is actually higher. It's just that the second hit on Bennett is higher. So when both added together, the difference is about 2%. When your elemental skill is level 9, Shenhe will give you a bigger buff than Bennett. It's about 79k, 3%. If you have level 12 elemental skill, which is C3, kind of costly, it's 83k. It's about 9% increase. So I'm not going to talk about the spending option. I'll just talk a bit about the achievable option for most players. So only a 3% boost over Bennett at Shenhe full attack build level 9 definitely doesn't feel great, right? Not to mention there are stat limits on Shenhe's buff. Although you also can argue the narrative to say that with Shenhe, I don't need to stay inside a field. I don't need to stay inside Bennett's field. Because we're talking about Ganyu, right? We're talking about her charge attack. You need to be in her field for the charge attack. You need to be in Bennett's field for the charge attack. No two way about it. Only her burst snapshots on that. So, in most scenarios, Bennett's burst will be active for about 4 to 5 Ganyu charge shots after factoring in your other character setup as well, set at time. While C0 Shenhe's whole buff is only active for 6 stats, which means 3 charge shots against a single target. C1 can double use, so C1 will make it such that you can match Bennett or overtake Bennett when it's a single target. When it's 2 targets, you still lose out slightly to Bennett. While C6 just removes this limit for Ganyu's charge attacks. Yeah, we always get to enjoy that. But honestly, I myself is not 100% convinced on getting C6 for Shenhe. But here's the thing, right? Shenhe can actually fit into a Ganyu Meltcom together with Bennett and Kazuha. Why am I comparing against Bennett? Because most people like to compare against Bennett, so I'm comparing. But in actual fact, there's no need for me to compare against Bennett if I'm going to use a Ganyu Meltcom, because I'm going to be using the two of them together. Right? We can go Bennett, Kazuha, Ganyu, Shenhe. And you will make Ganyu's damage really, really, really high. It's about 150k per second. Okay, initially I didn't want to show this, but I think we should just show this, right? So in this comp, where your supports are fully messed up, while your Shenhe is level your Shenhe is C0 with an R1 weapon. This is the type of damage you can be expecting with a level 9 buff. The first hit is 120k. The second hit is 190k. It's crazy. This is very crazy. Add these two together is about 300k. That's why I say on average it's about 150k per second, because she takes about 2 seconds to charge her attack. Oh, and just a note, right? Without Shenhe and with using Zhongli resistance strat, I do about 156k. This is based on my Ganyu stats, so and my Kazuha stats and my Bennett stats. So yeah, it's about 156k if I use Zhongli resistance strat without on the second hit. If we use Shenhe instead of Zhongli, we can farm it all the way up to 190k. Sorry, 180k. It's really crazy, because if you think about it, right? Itto with R5 FS Fitness 1 on the Albedo plus Bennett plus C6 Guru is about 157k per second. Oh, actually I kind of gave it away, right? This is the updated figure. I think I mentioned before that I need to do an update on Itto. So anyway, this is the updated figure. If you remember what I mentioned previously, the previous figure was something like 174k. This is 157k. Anyway, it's still freaking OP. But Freedom Swan has a caveats, right? I already talked about those in all my previous videos several times, so I'm not going to talk about that anymore. While Shenhe has her stat limits. I'll say this though, in a 10-second duration, Itto can definitely churn out this high damage more consistently than Ganyu. But the fact that Shenhe allows Ganyu to reach the same OP damage as a fully buffed Itto is crazy good. Because before Shenhe, right, if you've seen people asking me in comments for my Itto videos, I already said that Itto outdoes Hu Tao and Ganyu really. Even my current Melt Ganyu with the 156k on the second hit, he is still outdoing it. But now, with Shenhe in the Melt comp, she can actually allow Ganyu to match Itto. By the way, the Ganyu damage of 150k per second is also based on R5 Freedom Sword. Although, because the reason I mentioned this is because I mentioned it here, right? But I'll just want to make sure that it's clear that we are talking about the same type of buffs here. Same level, okay, I shouldn't say buffs. Same type of level of investment in the team. Oh, and one more thing is that the Melt comp also has one disadvantage. This Melt comp at least has no resistance to interruption, which is bad for Ganyu charging. Because if you get interrupted, there goes your DPS. But Itto comp has resistance to interruption. In case you are someone who doesn't want to pull for Itto, or you're on the you're still on the fence for Itto and you see this video and you think that Shenhe is better if you have Ganyu, I just want to make sure that it's clear that we are talking about a pure DPS focused build. Although there is healing, there's no shield, no resistance to interruption. That's bad for Ganyu charging. But Itto comp has resistance to interruption, both on Itto himself as well as Goro's buff. Now for freeze comp, there is no slot for Bennett to begin with. Right? Freeze comp typically is 1 animal, 2 cryo, 1 hydro. So a Venti Ganyu Kokomi Shenhe comp can still work well, even with the stats buff ending fast. You still can get 15% elemental burst damage buff from her A4 passive, 10% cryo damage in the field, 15% crit damage C2 in the field as well. Oh, I forgot the all important resistance shred as well. Okay, you get 15% resistance shred as well. But you do lose healing and shield from Diona. But it's not so bad because Diona shield is not as consistent as a Zhongli shield in the melt comp. Losing healing though is a bit painful, especially when you don't have a shield. But you have freeze. You are freezing enemies. So it's manageable. Oh wait, sorry, what am I talking about? I have Kokomi here. I have Kokomi here, so healing is not a problem. So this comp will work out well. I do lose healing from Diona, but I have healing in Kokomi anyway. Healing from Kokomi anyway. So not an issue. So if you ask me, Shenhe does have a very nice slot in the freeze comp. And also a nice slot in the Ganyu Melt comp, although you do lose your resistance to interruption. But you do gain a high damage buff as well. Depends on your personal preference. But I will do a video, or rather our next few videos will talk about whether or not you really need C1 for her to be an effective buffer. I mean, there's no doubt that C1 is really good. But do you really need it as opposed to C0? That's the point I'm trying to make here. Okay? Or rather, that's the point that we will explore in the future videos. So I hope this is helpful to you guys. At least we cover freeze comp, and you can just replace Ganyu with Ayaka here. And we cover melt comp for Ganyu as well. So this, although I call this a snippet, I think it's quite thorough for the analysis. So for the next videos, we will go into detail on Shenhe buffing Ganyu, covering in particular the playstyle, and more importantly, the managing of the stats. as well as the full comparison against Bennett. By full comparison, I meant like the full buff duration, for example. Bennett's full buff duration. Same will be done for Ayaka too after Ganyu, because I'm already halfway through for Ganyu, but I have not done for Ayaka yet. Or we may do Shenhe builds comparison instead, but that will require me to do a bit more math on Shenhe's main attack coupled with Chongyun. Because Chongyun giving 15% attack speed to her, I'm still kind of doubtful that it can hit the 50 stats on C4, but it should be able to do some decent damage. But we'll see once I do the rotation math. So let me know in the comments which do you guys prefer, Ayaka, Ganyu, or Shenhe builds comparison. Okay. Now they may not all come in the same time because if I run out of time, next week will have to be a focus on Itto and Red Hornstone Treasure, because next week will be the last week before they are out, before Itto is out. But I still have time for Shenhe. So that's why I say I may have to pause this. I may not be able to finish all this before we go back to Itto videos, because I have not done the rest of the 5-star weapons for Itto. I have not done Itto's signature weapon for other 5-star for other Claymore characters. So that's that as well. Okay. So anyway, thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content of my video, and please subscribe for more. Sorry this went on so long again. Yeah, but I hope that my analysis has been very thorough and very complete for you guys. And for the casual players, don't worry. Remember that at the end of each math series, I will do a compound math guide to simplify things. Okay? So, yep. I'll see you guys next video. Bye.